one of the things that I think is really important is that a lot of people think that, well, if we have diversity, then we are achieving the goal. And I would really push back on that thought, that it's not about the diversity, because you can have diversity and still have segregation. So how are we having genuine relationship with people who are different from us based on that, based on their ethnicity? How do we make sure we're not treating them as the other? So when I think about belonging, I automatically think about the opposite of belonging, which is othering, right? And how we other people, how we make people feel as though they don't belong. Take out a sheet of paper when you get a chance and write down the 2 or 3 people that you call whenever there's something really big happening in your life, right? And then also think about the people that when the pandemic is over, that you're like, oh my gosh, who are the 4 or 5 people that I really want to have dinner with again, or I really want to meet up with again, because I just miss them. I want them in my house. I need them in my space. Because for most people, when they write down those names or they think about those people, you'll find that they all share the same gender, the same ethnicity as the person that wrote the list. And so it happens that there is a default for what we consider to be normative. So what happens is that, let's say there's a new position you want to hire for, right? What happens is that you look within your network and you ask your friends, hey, do you know anybody that might be good for this? Well, if your network looks just like you and lives in the same neighborhood as you, you're never going to get the diversity that you claim you seek, because your network isn't diverse. When someone comes in, they're not just assimilating to work culture, chances are they're assimilating into white culture. And so there may be things about them that then separate them. You're like, oh, so-and-so isn't a right fit. Well, is it that they weren't a right fit for the work culture, or they weren't a right fit for the white culture? Do people have to cover a portion of their identity in order to assimilate into this workspace? Because if I have to cover who I am as a Black woman, then I'll never really belong, because there are going to be parts of my identity that I can't bring into the workspace. Are you doing diversity so you can have their presence? Or are you doing diversity so you can have their leadership? Because for most white people, they have never had to submit to anyone of color in leadership. Because you can ask people, have you ever had a teacher of color? Or when was your first teacher of color? You can ask people, when was your first boss of color? And most people in Canada can't point to that. So if you're going to really welcome them into all of it. Part of it is calling things what they are and naming them for what they are. And too often we're very polite with our language. I mean, I really appreciate, that whole idea of Canadian politeness as, your neighbor to the south. But at the same time, if you don't name it, you can't address it. And so we have to move beyond polite language to calling a thing a thing. What are you committing to do differently now that you've heard this?